Well, good evening. We're gonna start. Good evening and a warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our second webinar, which is called "Training for Tomorrow: AI in Law Firms and the Capabilities Evolution." My name is Nicoletta Panam, and I'm the head of events for AI and Law Club, which is a newly launched initiative exploring the intersection between artificial intelligence, law, and ethics, both at BPP University and beyond. If you haven't already, there will be a link to join our club and newsletter, which I will pin in the chat a little bit later. So feel free to sign up and stay in the loop about our future events in AI and law developments. Okay. Before we start as well, just a couple of housekeeping points. This session will be recorded and may be shared on our social media. It will also be passed on to Simmons and Simmons, who may use it for promotional purposes. Just to keep that in mind. If you prefer not to be recorded, please keep your cameras off. We will have a Q&A session at the end where you're more than welcome to engage with our speaker directly. And if you'd like to speak, please just raise your virtual hand and feel free to turn on your mic and your camera. If you'd rather stay anonymous, that's also perfectly fine. Just pop your question into the chat or the Q&A box that's also at the top there, and then we'll just read it out as we go along. Now, please keep your cameras and microphones off during the presentation to avoid disruptions. That would be great. And a little bit about myself as well. I'm currently a master's law student with interests ranging from different broads of subjects, really. I'm interested in animal rights, human rights, environmental law, and also litigation, emerging tech, and AI regulation. And outside of law school, I also work full time and I volunteer as a clinic assistant with the BPP Pro Bono Impact team. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also, running for marathons and half marathons and stuff like that, and as well as just tending to three of my fur babies as well. So quite a lot to do. Also, before I pass it on to our incredible speaker this evening, I'd like to just briefly introduce Daniel Kang, which is our founder and president of the AI and Law Club. Daniel has been instrumental in bringing this community to life and creating a space for students and professionals to engage with AI in this field and in the legal world. So, Daniel, if you're here, please, the floor is yours. Take onto the stage.
Hello everyone.
Daniel?
Hello.
Maybe it's just on my side. So, 1 second. Wait. Oh, you can hear Daniel. Okay, so it's just
Yeah.
okay. So, Daniel, yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Nico, for that wonderful introduction and for organizing this event. I'm Daniel, president and founder of the AI and Law Club here at BPP. Our club is about creating a space where students can explore the intersection of technology and law, and events like today's are at the very heart of that mission. We're very grateful to our guest speaker, Nick, for joining us to share his insights on how AI is reshaping legal training and the profession more broadly. A big thank you also to Simmons and Simmons for their support in making this possible. Before we begin, also just a quick note, our AI and Law blog is always open to contributions from members. You don't need to be an expert on AI, you don't need to be a professional. You just have to be a student curious about AI and willing to write. And we'd very much love to feature your voice. Thank you very much, everyone, and back to you, Nico.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Okie dokie. So now for the main event of the evening. We've got here the brilliant Nick Salerno-Taylor. He is a seasoned digital adoption specialist at Simmons Simmons with extensive experience in driving AI integration and user adoption strategies across enterprise environments. And with over a decade in client-facing training and consulting roles, Nick is a considered leader in AI training adoption, specializing in Microsoft Copilot and generative AI tools. And at the forefront of digital transformation initiatives, Nick also has played a pivotal role in designing and delivering AI adoption programs and building knowledge sharing communities, both internally and across the wider legal industry. And his work ensures that users not only understand AI tools, but also apply them effectively to achieve meaningful outcomes, which is even more of a reason why it's so exciting to have him with us this evening. So, Nick, over to you now, please.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be speaking with you. Thank you, Nicholas, for that lovely introduction. That was really nice. And thank you, Daniel, as well. Really do appreciate it. I'm not super familiar with this platform, so please bear with me while I muddle my way through everything this afternoon, or this evening rather. I'm just going to start with a screen share, so hopefully that's going to come up for everybody. Please do let me know if you're seeing my presentation screen coming up now. I'll keep an eye on the chat to see whether that is actually the case. It looks like it's coming up, so I'm hoping that's coming up for you as well. Brilliant, fantastic, thank you very much. Good stuff. So in that case, I'll get stuck in. So the topic that we had for today's call was AI in law firms, the capabilities evolution. Now, I kind of went with that title and suggested it to Nicoletta because this is kind of what we're seeing at the moment, I feel, within the law industry. Now, really, what does that mean? I think it's probably fair for me to start with that, and then we'll kind of work our way up from there. So, what is a capabilities evolution? Now, what I would say is that with AI integration into law firms, that really does kind of hinder on a few key points. Now, really, I think the best way to explain this is augmenting your capabilities in the sense that it's allowing you to further your own capabilities across certain fields. Creatively, very obviously is going to be one of those key factors. Because of course, if you're using AI to write something creatively, even just as simple as an email, that's effectively augmenting your capabilities, especially if it's something quite specific. Now, where we see this happen quite a lot is translation, for example. Now, I can't speak any other languages other than English, which is really shameful, to be honest. But if I ever needed to communicate with, let's say, one of my colleagues in another office in another region entirely, then that might be something that I choose to do. I might just use the Copilot Translate, and that will allow me to do that in an effective way. But it's augmenting my capabilities. So it's not something that I'd be able to do myself. Now, that's a really simple example. Now, obviously, to the furthest extent of it, you might find that you're using AI for drafting new documents entirely. Now, again, that's probably more on the creative side than some of the more kind of practical elements. So again, really kind of hinders on augmenting your creative capabilities. Now, another aspect of this, I would say, is also your operational capabilities as well. And what I mean by that is that you might find there's certain workflows that you'll be able to automate with the help of AI. Now, that isn't maybe necessarily the same as creativity, because that's really just getting AI to do something for you on that more kind of general basis, where it could just be like automatic responses. It could be setting up something like chatbots and agents, which is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. So it can augment your kind of operational capabilities as well. And with each of these, fairly obviously, there's the efficiency aspect as well. So it's kind of augmenting your own efficiency, making sure that you can complete tasks in a quicker way, definitely, in maybe a more precise way in certain cases and with certain kinds of workflow, but essentially allowing you to just get through your work streams a little bit more efficiently than if you were to not have AI. I hope that really what abilities are augmented. Perfect. Let's move on to implementation of AI in law firms. Now, as part of the talk here, I wanted to just really go through with you how this is looking within law firms at the moment where AI is implemented at just a very high level overview. So this might be interesting to some of you that are on your journey towards having your first job in law. Now, at the moment, the implementation of training really does kind of stick to essentially these kind of 4 key areas from what I've seen so far. Now, this is kind of in chronological order as well, just to mention it. So mandatory training fairly obviously is the first priority, and that's the main thing that law firms are obviously looking to ensure that all of their staff have done in order for them to use any kind of AI tools within their firm. Now, that would go to really ensure that there's AI literacy within the user base. Essentially that there's safe use and governance policies to make sure that you're using it in the right way, that there isn't anything kind of controversial going on with the data more so than anything, and just to ensure that there's understanding but compliance as well as those 2 kind of main areas. Now, outside of the mandatory learning, and again, the key is really in the title there, that's something that you need to go through in order to even use the AI tools. You then have, certainly in some places, firm-wide training of specific tools. Now, that's not necessarily a governance piece or just looking at the concept of AI. That's more looking at specific tools, like I said, ensuring that the users really understand them to a good degree and how to use them. Now, those kinds of launches might be really kind of targeting certain use case areas as well, again, depending on what tool that is, and really kind of make sure people understand the features and the benefits of those tools. Now, you might be thinking at this point, what tools are you even talking about? Now, we'll go to explain this in a little bit more depth shortly, but some of you may already know there are some law-specific Gen AI options out there, and there's also some more kind of general LLMs that you might find are being used in law firms as well. Now, the next one is consultation and community, and this is really a big part of what I'm doing at the moment within Simmons, and that's ensuring that there is a lively community within the firm to ensure that the questions are being answered about the use, how best to use it, so ensuring there's a best practice, but overly the adoption is on the increase within the firm and not the decrease. And what I mean by that is that people are using it well and using it effectively. It's going to be hard to do that without ensuring that there's some kind of a community approach and that consultation is available to users that need it. I'll keep using the term users here. Sorry, that's a very technical way for me to explain it. Anyone within the firm, I should probably say for that instead. And then we have more probably on my side of the fence, the assessment and tracking. Now, that's not necessarily something you need to be concerned about within the fee earner community, but from my side in IT broadly, we would have some kind of dashboards available that would track exactly what that adoption is looking like at any given stage, and then also trying to assess that data to help with those adoption levels, to make sure that we're targeting the right departments, the right areas, the right regions for that matter, to make sure that, again, that AI literacy, but probably more AI fluency, which is a little bit more in-depth understanding of how best to use AI, is really delivered within those teams. So yeah, a very typical kind of overseeing level. These are really the four kind of main points probably within a lot of firms at the moment. Okay, let's take a look at some do's and don'ts then, and how best to navigate your way around some of these potential challenges. Now, I'll start off with the don'ts. I don't usually like to start with negatives, but this way at least I can work up to the positives. So and I'll explain as we go. Don't use the wrong tools. Now, that probably needs some explanation in what I mean by that. But there are approved tools within firms, and you probably find as well there'll be some non-approved tools. But even the approved tools will probably have their better usage within certain kinds of environments and certain workflows, more to the point. Now, we'll also look at kind of reviewing the AI outputs for accuracy and bias, as well as a kind of a main point. But obviously, that's going to be so crucial to making sure that those tools are being used correctly, and you're not just, as the second point suggests, overly relying on the output and just assuming it's always correct. But by the wrong tools, what I really mean here is that you would potentially be faced with a certain task and potentially a variety of LLMs to use to aid you on that journey. Now, certain LLMs would be very much legal focused. Now, some of you may have heard of things like Harvey. We also have something within Simmons called Percy, which is our internal LLM that we use, which is effectively like our internal version of ChatGPT, but completely locked down within Simmons. Now, generally, these are very, very good and completely tailored towards legal work. Percy has, for example, a legal inference added to it to ensure that it really understands all the nuances of legal work and legal documents. Now, that is very important, of course, when actually trying to do legal work, is that you're using a tool that understands all those kind of concepts. Now, you may find that if you were to use, for example, a bit more of like a general LLM, and that could be like a Copilot or maybe even a ChatGPT if it's something that you can use within your firm, that wouldn't necessarily give you as detailed and as accurate and as probably legal compliant answer as those LLMs that are more legal focused. Okay, we'll look at some examples a little bit later. Now, going back to that second point then, over-reliance on the tools. Now, I'm sure you've probably seen some horror stories in the press about certain issues around not checking what's coming out of these LLMs, where false claims are made against, false court cases are being brought up that just never happened. They were complete hallucinations by the AI, but obviously weren't checked, so unfortunately came to court anyway. But even just for misinterpretations, I think, as well, it's fair to say, where you can just assume that the LLM has got the right answer for you, but in actual fact, it hasn't. Now, that can even just be, in more simple terms, as easy as me giving some data to an LLM, expecting it to give me a certain answer. And if it gives me completely the opposite answer, I'd have to really make sure that I'm confident in that actually being the right answer in the first place before actually taking that information anywhere. So again, it's always worth doing your due diligence to a hefty degree when using AI outputs, and just ensuring that it's accurate and that it's correct and that it's not sourcing information that it shouldn't. Okay, fantastic. And then last one I have down here is uploading of sensitive data. Now that's an obvious massive red flag in the world of law and AI. So even approved AI tools can have potential risks. I put on here. Now that can just mean that the data that you're uploading is stored in servers where you wouldn't want that data to be stored, or even just that it's stored in general. Obviously, confidential information always needs to be kept completely within house and never left effectively. So this is obviously something that the mandatory training usually would go through to a good degree of clarity. So it's something to be mindful of course, but in any kind of training, this will probably be one of the first things it will cover. Okay. Fantastic. So we've looked at the don'ts. Now let's look at some of the more positives here. Now the first one I put on here is persistence. Now I've been lucky enough to be part of this kind of realm, as it were, with the AI within law from relatively early on in its kind of progress, and I've seen some seismic changes from when it kind of first began, as it were. Maybe not from its absolute origins, but certainly from a few years ago when certain tools were in their infancy. Now, it may well be that when you are trying to get your LLM to create something or to give you a certain output, it's just not quite doing it, or it's not quite understanding perhaps the prompt that you're giving it. Now, of course, a lot of people in a very high pressure environment and very time poor environment as a lawyer might just think at that point, forget it, I'll just do it manually. I don't have time to experiment. But I will say that in a lot of cases, when you're dealing with certain use cases and certain work streams, it's just about firstly iteration, just making sure that you're trying your prompt in perhaps several different ways to see if you can get your LLM to understand it in maybe different wording. You can also even be so bold as to ask the actual LLM itself, can you write a prompt better for me than I'm currently doing against a certain task? And you'll be surprised with the answers. It will be able to generally create something a bit more bespoke for itself. And also how you kind of approach certain tasks as well. So you may find in some instances, if you're starting on a certain platform and asking the LLM to create something for you, again, you've got something really specific in mind and it's just not able to produce it. It may just be that you have to deconstruct the task itself, so to speak, and then just approach it in a different way. And that can mean doing something different with the sources, maybe even changing some of the information within the sources in certain cases, and then just applying that prompt right from the beginning. Now, I would probably say I don't ever feel like I've really lost time in experimenting with the prompts and LLMs, because any time that I would have potentially have lost, I've more than made up for in shaving off huge amounts of time off certain tasks that I've done. So I say in that respect, it's all quite relative and worth the investment of time. Now that also takes me on to the second point quite neatly, which is know how to use the tool, because that can make a massive difference in terms of the time spent on a particular task. Now, obviously, if you know how to use the tool effectively, you probably won't need to spend a huge amount of time on a task because you'll know the nuances of that tool, and you'll hopefully know how to kind of apply prompts in the best way to it. Now, how do you do that? This is somewhat biased from me, but best to engage in some training, whether that's externally or internally, whatever's available to you. But that really is the best way to stay on top of all the new developments happening within the whole kind of AI sphere, but also any specifics around the tools as well. Now, earlier I mentioned that we use an LLM Percy, which is our internal Gen AI. Now, that's something that has some quite specific ways in which you'd approach prompting. Now, again, because that's very legal task focused, you would prompt very detailed prompts in making sure it's breaking down the workflow, knowing where you're sourcing the information from, and also how to kind of get to the answer that you really want it to get to. Now, that can be very different in using something like a Copilot, which is very much like a Microsoft tool for productivity. Now, you wouldn't necessarily do a really big, weighty prompt into Copilot. That's probably something you'd use a little bit more iteratively, where you would maybe then start with a concept like, please, can you create a PowerPoint for me that maybe mentions this, this, and this, and here's the document I want you to kind of base as the source file. And then from there, you just take that into further and further steps. So that makes sense. But yeah, knowing how to use the tool indefinitely will help you on that journey. And then, as I kind of alluded to earlier as well, using a community to really help you in your journey and help you learn, and also see what other people are doing as well. So collaboration is a massive point. Troubleshooting with others is something that you probably find very, very useful, and just able to kind of give you a little bit more clarity on how certain tasks should be done, but also how not to approach tasks in some cases. So always best to kind of join together on AI workflow and really kind of see how are people doing this successfully, or even what tasks are being done in AI, and how could I maybe use that in certain workflows. Okay, I know I'm being quite general so far, but yeah, bear with me. I'll go through some examples shortly. And I think before I jump into AI fluency, how I best break the questions, Nicholas, or I'm okay just to carry on for now? I'm happy just to carry on if we've got like a whole section for Q&A at the end. Okay, I'll carry on for now. Okay, so next I have AI fluency for new starters. Now this is really just to show what's kind of useful early on. And this could even be, again, kind of before you've started in your journeys. Brilliant, thanks for just seeing your comment there. So here's some benefits of AI fluency for trainees, but also, again, like I said, even people prior to your journey within law firms. Now, one thing that I found massively useful is accelerated learning, and that can be in a very kind of general sense, using AI to really leverage your learning methods, I'll say. Now, of course, AI enables you quick summarization and comparative analysis, but it also offers you things like interactive Q&A, which is really useful. Now, again, I'll elaborate on that. When I was going through an exam fairly recently, and I was prepping for it, I was using one of my more kind of preferred Gen AI tools just to ask it some questions that I knew were going to come up within that exam paper and give me the rationale behind the answers. Now, that's something that you probably would find, well, you might get that within certain learning programs, but I found it very useful having that Gen AI actually be responding to me when I kind of probe it. So if there was something in the rationale that I didn't really kind of realize was the reason why the answer was correct, I could question it and say, why is that right? Or I thought it was that. Why is it not this? So it's a bit more interactive than just your usual kind of learning material. Now, I'll also give a bit of a different example, if I may, that outside of the kind of a law context, but I think is quite pertinent to how people learn. Now, I've got a 5-year-old son, and he's very switched on, and he asked me some quite challenging questions. Now, often I don't find that too difficult. I'll just try and give him the best answer, but obviously condense it in such a way that he can understand it. But certain things are a bit of a challenge. And at one point, he asked me at the dinner table. I can't think of how we got onto the concept exactly, but he was asking me about cells in the body, and more specifically, blood cells, white blood cells and red blood cells. And I got limited understanding. It's not really my area of expertise, but I did my best in trying to explain what the difference was. And I got to a point where I thought it's a bit difficult for me to really kind of explain, even in layman's terms. So I actually went to the Gen AI I have on my phone. I just typed in there, can you explain white and red blood cells, but in the context of knights in castles? Because that's a language that my son really understands, because he's crazy about medieval stuff. Now, as you can imagine, it did a really, really good job of kind of creatively putting this concept together of, the certain cells in the body. That's your white knights, and then you have your red knights, and they've both got a very specific job to do within your castle being your body. You get the idea. So it went into a good level of depth, but in a language that my 5-year-old son could understand perfectly. Now, why am I mentioning that in the first place? It's very useful to, again, as a learning tool, put things into context for yourself. Now, again, if you're trying to learn something quite challenging and something that really isn't in your kind of, not, language, but something that you would need to assimilate in a different way, consider putting it through AI and asking it to maybe translate it for you in a certain kind of tone, not in a certain language necessarily, but put this in a way that you would understand and even apply a completely different context. You might find that helps you just with that learning journey, especially with some quite challenging areas. Okay, I'll move on. So next we have admin assistants. Now that's probably the more obvious one here, but things like meeting recaps, actions lists, and file notes really are going to be swept up with AI helping you in a massive way. Now, again, you'll probably see that within some of the kind of earlier tasks that you're being delegated. But it's a very, very useful tool to just make things easier for you. Again, for a quick example on this one, if you're in a situation where you were on a meeting, effectively taking notes with, let's say, a panel of clients, and there's a hot topic being discussed, with something like Copilot, which is Microsoft's Gen AI, you can prompt within the meeting itself, just in the meeting notes that are being transcribed automatically if the session is being recorded, and you can ask it on the fly. So, for example, you could be half an hour into a meeting, and you can then ask it, can you just give me a quick overview of what's been discussed so far? And obviously for yourself as that person in the meeting, it will just show you the results of that. Won't show that to anyone else, of course. If you're on Copilot, it will just give that to you. And you can, again, augment your capabilities and make it seem like you've been there the whole time, completely 100%, where actually you might have been transcribing something else in the background, and then just able to just dip back into very specific elements of that meeting. Now, the last point I think is really something to dwell on, and that's to be an SME in a revolutionary development. Now, just to explain the acronym, SME is subject matter expert. So if you are well versed in AI and LLMs, then of course having that as your skill set going into any workplace at the moment is going to be seen as a big asset. It's rapidly advancing, as most of you probably well know. and a very big priority for a lot of workplaces. If you are already well up on AI and understands its nuances and how to approach it, that's only ever going to benefit you, I think, at this point in the job market. Now, as we were discussing some of those areas earlier, I thought I've mentioned prompting quite a lot as something that's really quite key to unlocking the most useful parts of AI, and that might need a little bit of explanation as well. So this is something that I've been kind of taught from Microsoft from a long time ago now, that in prompting, you can stick to this acronym to really ensure you get the best results. And that is quite easy to remember, especially if you're gone through the English school system, and that's GCSE. So goal, context, source, and expectation. If your prompts include all of these, you can't go too far wrong to get a really good detailed output. So if you're including a goal within that prompt to say exactly what you want, so that could be something like a new document, maybe like a draft agreement, let's say, that's the goal. The context you would then give perhaps for a new client around Enry, for example. So you're giving the LLM the context of what you want to create in the background. Apply the source, of course. Now that can be quite a few things. That can either be an existing document, that could be maybe a folder of documents, or that could even just be, again, in a more kind of co-pilot sense, all my previous emails and Teams chats, where it can then kind of put some things together for you. Now, given what I was going through there, the source might be sourcing this existing agreement document that we're looking to replicate most of. And then that very end one is the expectation, just to ensure that you're shaping how that's actually going to look at the end from your LLM. So that could be something like, make sure it's at least including X, Y, and Z, and is 20 pages long, let's say, that kind of thing. Now, I'm giving some really rough examples there, but I'll show you a prompt which contains that exactly. Now, one I've got here, probably a little bit more on the legal workflow, is summarize the outcome of a recent commercial litigation case for a corporate client. Now, straight away, we can see there we have the goal, which is summarize the outcome. And we've also got the context, which is recent commercial litigation case for a corporate client. Use the court judgment and relevant legal analysis to outline the key facts, the decision, and its implications for the client's business operations. So now we've got some, other than the context, we've also got the specifics and the source, more to the point. And on the end here, we've got the expectation, which is ensure the summary is clear and concise. Now, that might seem quite simple, but there's been occasions where I've done demonstrations with LLMs, and I've forgotten to put something like, make sure it's a short summary, and then suddenly it's given me like a 20-page document. I only meant it to be like a 5 bullet point summary. So expectation is actually very important, more so than you think. I'll leave that on the screen for a moment just for you to check over that again, but that would be a good example of a prompt that contains all of those elements in GCSE in a legal workflow oriented Gen AI use case. Okay, hope that makes sense. Brilliant. Now, going back to what I was discussing earlier about being an SME and having that skill set, I just wanted to share with you just a few kind of key points here that I was able to capture from a Microsoft seminar fairly recently, which is this overview of in-demand skills for a new era of work. Now, this is from a LinkedIn survey. You can see from here, absolutely top of that board at the moment is AI capabilities. And that's just showing there how crucial it is at this point to make sure that you have that skill set. Now, interestingly enough, all the points beneath that, you can still see are very much human strengths: conflict mitigation, adaptability, process optimization, and innovative thinking. Now, I will say this, obviously, everything that I've talked about so far has been how useful AI is. AI is nothing without that human element. You really do need that person in the driving seat, being able to conduct it effectively and making sure that it's doing the best job that it can do. So those human strength is still absolutely paramount, of course, but having AI literacy will, as you can see, put you in a strong position. Now, I just wanted to show you as well a few stats here for AI skilling and digital labor, and kind of where that sits within this same survey. Now, as you can see, and sorry, this is slightly fuzzy here on my screen, the top one here is prioritizing AI-specific skilling of existing workforce. 47% of all respondents put that as their main area, which I think is fantastic. So really making sure that that is top priority for a lot of companies. You can see is interestingly the highest one there. But second highest is this rather refreshing one here: maintaining headcount but using AI as digital labor. Now, I'm sure some of you have probably heard some horror stories, and probably have some quite valid concerns around where the future is really going with AI integration into, well, all sectors. But the fact that, again, a lot of workplaces, now these aren't all firms within the legal sector, but the fact that maintaining headcount is still a very high percentage here, I think, should be somewhat of a comfort. Those are the main ones I wanted to highlight, really. So just be mindful of the fact that this really is the hot topic at the moment, right the way across the industry. Okay. Now, with that, I wanted to just take a look at a little bit more on the impact of the legal workforce. Now, this is kind of as it stands, but also somewhat looking ahead as well. There are obviously limited areas that I can really kind of look at going forward at this point. But what I can say is a shift in task composition is definitely apparent. And that's making sure that those integrations with AI are effective and adapting some of those more kind of usually monotonous legal tasks. So you may well find this going forward as well, as that there is generally going to be a bit more of a shift in the way that certain tasks are done. Now, with that, there's also emerging roles in legal work as well. So as this is a somewhat kind of generational development, that will also come with it some specific roles. So new legal roles, for example, legal engineers. You might see adverts for that start popping up for some firms that really do kind of reflect that evolving legal landscape at this point. Again, lots of firms are really looking to that to join together people with that legal knowledge and expertise with the more technical abilities, and making that into its own role within a firm. And then we have things like training and governance updates being pretty routine as well. Now, again, there's so much going on in the AI space in general. Lots of legal softwares outside of kind of an AI space are looking to now integrate AI into their softwares as well. So wherever you go, you'll probably find that that's a key area to ensure staff are well up on. Is all the main training around governance is done to a high standard, so you really understand kind of the why and how of using AI within the workplace, but also on a more regular basis, getting up to speed with what's new, what's just been developed, what are we doing now? Because, like I said, it is a fast developing space. Okay, fantastic. With that, I've got a couple of other points to just really quickly raise here with you, just on opportunities at Simmons at the moment. I'll make sure that Nicoletta's got the links to send here properly. There is an AI law internship that has applications going from the 15th, I think, of October, as well as some further graduate opportunities as well. I think the applications, again, are being released on the same date for that. Love, I've just seen Nicoletta put that in the chat as well, which is super helpful. But yeah, do please look out for those, and yeah, feel free to send your applications in.